Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Mikey McNuggets, and it's not Jason Lloyd joining me this morning. It is Justin Rowan from the Chasedown Podcast, coming to us from beautiful, somewhere up near Edmonton, Canada, somewhere in Ontario. It's up north of the border, Justin. I know you like hockey from Canada, and you like the Canadian Football League. I see you tweeting about the gray skies and all that stuff. So, what part of Canada are you from, actually?
Manitoba. I'm directly above, North Dakota. If I go south, I'm going to hit Oklahoma City. I'm going to hit Houston. I'm square in the middle of the continent. I'm honored to be filling in or taking the place of Jason Lloyd. It's a true treat. Thank you so much for having me on.
Listen, Jason gets paid for one show a week, and we had to do an emergency DG stream on Monday. So I was like, hey, the people want a Cavs show on Wednesday. I got to give them a Cavs show on Wednesday. Who can I call upon? I called upon my good friend here, Justin. And Justin, we got a lot to get to. There's been some, just call it wild discourse among Cavs Twitter since the end of the season. I think some of it is 1,000% fair. I think some of it is 1,000% outrageous. So I want to give you the floor first. Justin, since the season has ended, what has been your take, or what have you made of a lot of the back and forth, the ins and outs, the debates we have seen online in terms of what are valid talking points that we should be focused on versus what's the nonsense that isn't even worth our time?
I might surprise you a little bit here because I don't really distinguish a whole lot of it as nonsense. Like when you're coming up with fake scenarios that aren't even legal under the CBA, that maybe it's nonsense, right? Like I don't think people understand, they think there's a lot of loopholes, right? Like they think when they negotiated this collective bargaining agreement, hey, we can dump a couple salaries, we can just sneak under, then all of a sudden make all these types of maneuvers, and then we'll shoot right back up over the second apron. I think people are used to collective bargaining agreements that are a little more flexible, where you are able to, kind of finesse some of the stuff. Hey, if you're willing to pay enough, you can do whatever you want. That sort of stuff, I don't think that there's a lot of use for, just because it's not, feasible. It's not possible. I don't think people realize if you do dip on under, you're going to be hard capped at that second apron.
Yep.
Might mean you can't even finish, fill out a roster. But the rest of it, in terms of kind of team building philosophy, I don't want to be sitting here policing that, because if you had preconceived notions about the viability of what this roster is, what their ceiling is as a team, nothing that happened last season is going to change your mind on where that team is at. As much as, we understand the context of what happened last season, it's not like there's been new information that's going to change people's minds. And basketball is such a subjective sport. You look at the last 7 champions, including whether OKC or Indiana wins. You look at the last 7 champions, every single one of these teams has been built differently. Like, I think we are just adjusting to a new world. And, I think all kind of perspectives when it comes to team building and how far away the Cavs are, it's understandable. And I'm not going to sit here saying just because someone disagrees with me, I don't think that their point of view is valid.
Yeah, when I look at nonsense, I don't mean in terms of that opinion or that take is crazy. More of just the overall arching opinion to me that the Cavs are so far off. To me, that's nonsense because they weren't that far off. Now, it was an incredibly disappointing finish to the playoffs, Justin. I don't want to sugarcoat it. But to say they are eons away from being able to compete with Indiana and Boston and the other top teams in the East, I just don't buy it. I don't think they were that far off. So when I hear people say, hit eject for the sake of hitting eject because this, as currently constructed, could never work, I don't buy that. I'm willing to make changes, and we'll get to the changes, keep whatever in a sec. To me, that's part of the nonsense that I don't think they were that far off. They weren't ready, but I don't think they were that far off.
I don't think so either. And people can feel free to disagree with me on this. I think even in their injured state, I think they had enough to beat Indiana. I think if they had the kind of composure, the maturity to do what was necessary to win that series, I think they could have beat the Indiana Pacers even with the injuries that they had. I think the injuries leveled the playing field, that we saw the team that was able to maintain its identity at a higher level and play with that level of maturity that the Cavs are not yet at. I think the injuries brought it to that level where that became a conversation. Obviously, game 2, that's a brutal loss. That's a brutal way to lose.
Still coming back from that.
The aspects that they could control, incredibly frustrating. The aspects that were out of their control, Garland, Mobley, and Hunter being out of the lineup. Donovan Mitchell pulling his calf in the fourth quarter and not being able to create separation on inbounds. That's tough, right? Like those parts are out of your control. 2 blown lane violations that if a single one of them is called properly, it's a Cavs win. All of that, is difficult. But I still think when your ultimate goal is to win a championship, the data points we got in that series are important. I think if the Cavs went up against the Oklahoma City Thunder, because I don't think they would have had a problem against the Knicks if they were fully healthy, if we're going down hypothetical lane here, I don't think they would have had a problem against the Knicks. I think the Thunder would have smoked them because
I'm so glad you said that, Justin.
The issues that we saw against Indy, OKC is going to pressure you, to a much, much, much higher level. Indy's able to play better than some of their parts on the defensive end. Oklahoma City does that with much better parts. That's the best team in the league right now.
So the other part of the nonsense I wanted to hash out was, while I don't think the Cavs were that far off in the East, I don't think comparing them just to teams in the East is a fair comparison. If the Cavs want to be a legitimate championship contender, OKC is now the bar, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Game 3 is tonight. It's 1-1. Indy came back and won game 1. OKC is the barometer I think the Cavs have to be looking at. And when you're building what they feel is a championship core, you have to ask yourself, does this championship core give us a chance to beat OKC? And OKC right now can play 13 different styles. Indiana wants to play this frantic, chaotic pace on offense and pack the paint on defense. And OKC says, okay, we'll play that style too. And if they want to play with 2 bigs, well, they have Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. And if you want to play with more guards, well, they'll take out one of their bigs and go 4 guards, and they have legitimately 3 all defensive caliber guards. And then their worst guard is SGA, who is one of the best steel artists, whatever you want to phrase it as, in the NBA. To your point, Justin, Indiana showed the blueprint in terms of how to disrupt the Cavs offense. Yeah. Oklahoma City would have taken that blueprint and drawn the Mona Lisa and built the Taj Mahal against that Cavs offense. I don't think they're built. And my biggest complaint coming out of that Indiana series, Justin, I don't think you and I have actually talked about this.
No, we haven't.
Was the Cavs didn't have a counterpunch. Like what worked so well for the Cavs in the regular season was their ability to beat guys off the dribble, get in the paint, force a rotation, and then attack closeouts and attack a defense in rotation. They were the best 3-point shooting team in the NBA on corner threes. They got and generated a ton of wide open looks by attacking the rotation. And then Indiana said, all right, we're not going to help off guys. We don't think because of the injuries, Evan, DeAndre, Darius, they're not going to be able to beat us one-on-one. So we're just not going to help. You got to beat us one-on-one. And Cleveland still tried to run the exact same offense, in my opinion. I know Kenny Atkinson said they tried to tweak things up. My eyes didn't see that, but Kenny's smarter than me. I'll defer to him. They didn't really have a counterpunch, Justin. They tried to run the exact same stuff. And Indiana was playing a defensive style that played right into their hands. They had no counter. And to me, that was the most disappointing part of the playoff flameout.
Yeah, like they baited Mitchell into being a scorer, right? And they basically said, if we don't send help to Donovan Mitchell, we are not giving him playmaking reads that he's going to make, right? Like Donovan has improved so much as a playmaker, but he's still not passing guys open the same way that a Darius Garland does, right? Mm-hmm. Like there is a difference there. And, it's one of the things with this Cavs build, when I look at their top 3 guys, they all need each other. Like, I think this is a little different than some of the other teams where, the star players are a little more independent. If Donovan Mitchell wasn't in a series, I don't think Darius is able to score at the level necessary in order for the Cavs to have a great playoff offense. If Darius Garland isn't himself, or if he's out of the lineup, I don't think Donovan Mitchell is a playmaker at the level to have, a top 10 offense or have a successful playoff offense. He can get his own as a scorer, but we've seen time and time again that the overall offense suffers in those scenarios. We've also seen it's really difficult on his body. Then without Evan Mobley, like, you're just not going to have a good defense with him on the court. And, I think Indiana really did push them outside of their identity. That felt like Indiana Pacers basketball. And I think that's one of my biggest things when I look at the Cavs is They need to establish what that identity is, and they need to dictate the terms of engagement when you're in a playoff series against them. And that doesn't always mean, hey, we're going to play this one specific style. Cavs basketball might mean, hey, we are going to change it up a little bit. We're going to throw different looks at you. I think that's true of, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like, they can pull Isaiah Hartenstein out of the starting lineup and play a different lineup, one that they've gone through, throughout the regular season. From a Cavs standpoint, I think they really stayed in a lot of base coverages on defense and offense throughout the regular season, thinking, hey, we're going to throw some wrinkles in the playoffs. We saw them go full court press against Miami. And I don't know if they still had that kind of stuff planned for Indiana, and then the injuries made that so it just wasn't feasible. That's, kind of one of those great unknowns, but it didn't feel like Cavs basketball. And, as much as you can say they tried running the same stuff, it varied from what we saw in the regular season to some extent because Mobley wasn't getting the same touches. And can you recall a single game where in a playoff setting or in a big game, we just keep going to Evan Mobley and he doesn't deliver? Like it's a 5 of 20 game. I've seen 3 of 11 games, but I've never seen him, go out swinging. And I think some of that's on Mobley. Some of that's definitely on both of the guards. Some of that's on Kenny. It's a shared responsibility. But I would like to see us, particularly when both guards are so limited. Like I look at Darius and Donovan in game 5, they were playing their asses off. I don't think they had another series in them. Like even if they beat the Pacers, Donovan looked like he did against Boston. I think he would have had to be shut down at some point. Darius obviously needed surgery. They were both playing so hard in those games. And, from Darius's perspective, I was actually surprised he was moving so well in the defensive end. Like, Nembhard couldn't turn the corner on him and had to stiff arm him out of the way. Like, I thought they were giving it their all. But part of why, I'm not watching the finals being like, it should have been us there, is because they just didn't have another round in them. Like and the Knicks weren't going to beat them if healthy, but they were certainly going to beat them in the state that they were in.
I mean, we can go back to it. It is crazy, Justin, how a final 48 seconds of game 2 changed everything, changed the trajectory. I mean, you win that game, it's 1-1 going to Indy. Who knows how it pans out? Now, they used all their gas. Like, they were wrung dry. However, being down 0-2 and having 2 days to sit on the collapse that you just, I don't even know what the right word is, the collapse that you just witnessed firsthand and went through, and to have that gut punch knowing you had given that level of fight without 3 of your top 6 guys to then come up short there was no coming back from that. But something mentioned on Mobley, Justin, is where I wanted to get to in a second. Let me first mention that FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Game 3 of the NBA Finals is going on later tonight. If you want to bet on Game 3 of the NBA Finals, whether it be player props, the spread, over-unders, individual team props, you think of it, you can find it on FanDuel. If you use promo code FanDuel.com/UCSS as a new customer, place a $5 bet. You can win $200 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet hits. Head over to FanDuel.com/UCSS to get it on the action today. You mentioned Evan Mobley's usage here, Justin, and you never want someone to get hurt. Obviously, we hope Darius makes a speedy recovery. Hopefully the toe is completely healed whenever he gets back on the court. But the one silver lining to this injury update we got on the Darius Garland front is there is a chance it could force the Cavaliers to start the 25-26 season without him on the court, which means you get real, live, legitimate, not preseason, not training camp, real live game reps of running an offense that significantly features Evan Mobley more than we have seen in the past. I will die on this hill. I won't die alone because I know there's some other people out there, but I will die on the hill that for the Cavs to win a championship, Evan Mobley has to become their best overall player. Doesn't mean he has to be their leading scorer, but he has to be their best overall player. And he made a tremendous jump from year 3 to year 4 this season. Yeah. Second team All-NBA is nothing to scoff at. But I think there's still another gargantuan leap he can make as an offensive player. The three-point shot made significant improvements. He get a little better as a three-point shooter. But he only took 38 mid-range shots all last season. I want to see him operate more in the high post. I want to see his usage rate go up, run offense through him, pass it into the high post where Evan Mobley can either take a guy off the dribble, hit a mid-range jump shot. He's a good enough passer to facilitate off-ball action, get it to Donovan or Darius or Max Strus or whoever coming off some backside doubles, pin downs, you name it, they run it. He can facilitate and make those passes. And when Darius comes back, whenever that may be, let's just call it December 15th for the sake of our discussion here. The day is arbitrary. That could be 10 or 15 games where you can get a little preview, but a big enough sample size to not say it's just one game, of some of the things that Evan can and can't handle in that increased role. And then when Darius comes back, he's still going to work his way back into the offense. He then learns how to play off of an offense where he becomes more of the third option as opposed to being the second option. And I'm not trying to take shots out of Darius. And I think there's enough balls. That sounds weird. There's enough opportunities and possession for everyone to still get their fair share of the pie. But I just want to see Evan, and particularly the usage rate going down in the playoffs, to me, Justin, made no sense. He was dominant in the first quarter of game 5, and then he was MIA for quarters 2, 3, and part of quarter 4. You mentioned it's on him. It's on the guards. It's on the coaches. Like, you got to make a concerted effort to get him the rock. But the one silver lining of the DG injury to me, though, is you're going to get 10 to 20 games of a real regular season sample size to let Evan have a chance to run the offense that I think eventually will be their best offense in terms of giving them a shot to win a championship.
Absolutely. And I think people don't realize, like, in the regular season, Mobley actually led the team in front court touches. So, touches that are established in the front court. Playoffs, that dropped down to like 4th. Like, it was just such a dramatic shift in how they approach the regular season. And for me, I just want to see that true usage go up for Evan Mobley. Great stat that Seth Partnow came out up with. It's available on B-Ball Index. Basically, true usage is tracking not only your usage, which is, does a possession end with you taking a shot or having a turnover, it also factors in how many possessions end with you creating a shot opportunity for someone else. I want offense to be running through Evan Mobley. Kenny, last offseason, they had in training camp a shot clock that was down at 18 seconds, right? Like, that's how they were playing because they wanted them to get into their sets quicker. They wanted the tempo to be up. This year, it should be no one gets to take a shot until Evan Mobley touches the basketball.
Yes.
Like, I want to touch on every single possession for Evan Mobley. And, I think that's going to be really important too, because I think what you've seen these last couple seasons is when Darius has missed stretches, Donovan, it has not gone well for him physically, right? Like, they went, I think it was 12-4 in the games with Donovan and Jarrett, right? Like, there was that stretch where even Donovan was out and they managed to win some games, but they went 12-4. And I think the only winning record team that they played was the Orlando Magic. And then Donovan missed the entire post All-Star game stretch. You see him play, a couple games against Miami without Darius, and then a couple games against Indiana. And you have one of these wear and tear soft tissue injuries coming up. I want Donovan, honestly, if fully healthy, I want Donovan to be third in touches, but I still want him to be the leading scorer. I want him to be that leading play finisher. I want to conserve, his possessions and have him be, that great off-ball weapon that we have, so that Mobley can get those touches. I think Darius, as a playmaker, he's one of the best in the league. You look at that assist to turnover ratio in terms of usage, it's Jokic and Brunson. They're the only guys ahead of him, right? So I want that to kind of be that natural hierarchy, but I do think that there's a real opportunity for Mobley to take on that larger playmaking role. And we've been saying it for 3 years on our podcast, because the only teams you see that win with a smaller backcourt that plays, consistent minutes together on a regular basis. No, everyone focuses on starting, but there are teams like the Toronto Raptors that won with Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry at 5'11" playing consistent minutes together. Steph Curry and Jordan Poole. I know Jordan Poole's an inch taller than Donovan Mitchell. If you're really going to tell me that's the difference, I don't know.
Donovan's built like a linebacker. I know he's considered a small guard, but Donovan doesn't get bullied defensively. He just gets picked on. It's different levels.
Right. He falls asleep off ball a little bit. Regular season effort on the defensive end is probably on the weaker end, but we know that he can elevate when it's important, right? Like, the teams that you see that win with smaller guards always have front court initiation, whether it's Draymond Green, Kawhi Leonard, Marc Gasol, that you can run offense through. And honestly, you know how I mentioned that the last 7 teams to win a championship, including whoever wins this year, are all built differently? Mm-hmm. The one consistent thing that all of these teams share is they have at least 4 players that you can count on to initiate offense. And usually it's balanced between the backcourt and the front court, right? We saw that with Indy, right? Siakam can do that. Even Miles Turner has turned into, an intelligent passer. Nemhard, right? Neesmith can run, actions on the weak side and stuff like that. Obviously, OKC has that. Even though Shea's kind of the only true engine there, they have intelligent passers. Hartenstein's able to do that. Like all their wings, Caruso, they're able to provide those types of possessions. Obviously, that's true. The teams that won the last few years. The Cavs need to have that balanced playmaking approach, because I think the reason why their offense keeps failing in the playoffs is because too much of the burden goes down on the guards. Both, Donovan and Darius have been broken down the last few years in the playoffs. That's had an impact on it. But whether it is a lack of execution and not getting the ball to Evan Mobley, or a lack of options, when you look back at that Knicks series where Mobley wasn't doing well in the short roll, he wasn't making those playmaking reads, and they had nobody else. That lack of balanced playmaking, I think, is one of the biggest things that's gone wrong with the Cavs. Because as much as people talk about the defense, it's been the offense that's failed them more. It's been the offense that has consistently failed them. The starting lineup had a 107 D rating against Indy. That's the same as OKC in the regular season. And honestly, here's the best example. Chris Finch, after the Wolves lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Wolves had a worse defensive rating against the Thunder than the Cavs did against the Pacers. And they have great defensive personnel up and down the lineup. What was he talking about? It wasn't how we need to step up defensively. It was, we need ball handling and we need playmaking. That's how you beat these switching defenses. That's how you beat this press. That's how you beat this pressure. And when you score better on the offensive end, it's going to have an effect on your defense. You're going to make it harder for a team like Indy to get out in transition, to get those easy buckets, to get that momentum. They're pulling the ball out of their own basket. They're not going to be playing with that same level of confidence.
I found the stat I was looking for. The Cavs' offensive rating in the regular season versus the postseason the last 3 years. Justin, you ready for this?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready for this one.
It's painful. In 22-23, they had a 116.7 offensive rating. That was 7th in the NBA. In the playoffs, it dropped to 101.9, which would have ranked 30th. In 23-24, they had a 115.3 offensive rating in the regular season. That was 18th in the NBA. It dropped to 111.7 in the playoffs. That would have been 25th. This year, number one offensive rating in the league, 122.5, second best offensive rating the NBA has ever tracked. It fell to 112.6 this year, which would have been 22nd in the league. Their defense in the playoffs, going even back to the JB era, it's been great, but they have lost because they can't score. And I thought against Indiana, partially due to injuries, if you had blindfolded me and said, what kind of offense are you watching? It felt a lot like those JB Bickerstaff level offenses that we got so frustrated with, because it all fell on Donovan to be your lone creator. Yeah. And that's why when we talk about, is there a move to make? Should you trade Darius? Should you move Jarrett Allen? I'm open to anything at this point, Justin. But if you're going to get something back, you have to get playmaking back. The one deal, and I got an ad read that I'm curious what you think, but the one deal with the Timberwolves that involves Jaden McDaniels and like Mike Conley, sure, yes, you help fix one issue with as a big 3-and-D wing. Jaden McDaniels doesn't offer you any offensive creation. If you rewind, and
also the three is a little generous. He's about a 33% shooter.
He's at least a 3-and-D archetype. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But where's your offensive creation coming from? Do you want? You've seen what happened year after year when Donovan has to become your only primary backcourt playmaker. And I know Ty had a terrible playoff series. You would hope he gets back and has at least a little bit more confidence in his second go around of the playoffs. But who else is creating? And you could say, well, Evan has to take a big step forward. We all agree on that already. But you know what's awesome? Donovan, Evan, and Darius, or another legitimate playmaker who, when healthy, is a top 25, 30 guy in the league. So I've seen a lot of those trades, Justin. I want to do a read, then I want to ask you about the future of the core four. But when we're looking at any of these deals, you got to get back playmaking, because playmaking is what wins in the playoffs. It's not shooting, it's playmaking. And as Chris Finch said in that same press conference, we have guys that can shoot. We don't have guys that can get them open shots. You need playmakers to generate those open looks. Our next topic is brought to us by Buckeye Credit Union. If you guys don't know Buckeye State Credit Union, let me introduce you to your newest financial best friend. They have 5 locations across Ohio, including one in Cleveland. That location is in Shaker Heights. If you can't get to a store in person, they make banking easy and convenient online. They have all the things you need: auto loans, lines of credit, you name it. Buckeye State Credit Union has it. Their core principles: simplify, adapt, make them innovative, cutting through the clutter, making it the easiest banking and credit situation you can find anywhere. particularly in Ohio. For more information, head to BuckeyeStateCU.org. Buckeye State Credit Union, your money simplified. So, Justin, that brings us to the last portion of today's show. We'll do this quickly, but if it was up to you, if you were sitting in Kobe Altman's shoes, would you lean more towards running it back and keeping the core four together, or are you seriously listening to offers from teams for anybody, mainly Darius and Jarrett, because those two seem to be the most likely to be moved in the case of an offseason deal?
Yeah, what we've been kind of saying all offseason is you owe it to yourself to do your due diligence, right? And I think that's what Brian Windhorst has been saying as well, right? Like when you're going into the second apron, which functionally they have to operate like one now, even though that doesn't start until July 1st, your options become very, very limited. You owe it to yourself to find out what those options are. But the realities of you're only really able to swap, those core guys for either a 1-for-1 or 1-for-2 kind of situation mean that you have to look at those salaries below those guys, right?
Mhm.
And as much as Jarrett gets talked about as a core four player, from a salary cap perspective, you're talking about like an Alex Caruso type slot, right? Like for another year, he doesn't get up to that Hartenstein level for another year. And, that's certainly not on the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren level, right? Like there is a difference there. And when it comes to Darius, when you look at players around him, it's Jalen Suggs, it's Drew Holiday. Like we're talking about role players. So it's not like you can even get a real plus in addition to those guys because they make just as much. So with that, I am skeptical that those options are available, but you still need to find out what is there. I do think, when you're evaluating kind of the importance of the core, what I said before about the top three, kind of, even though there's some redundancies in terms of two guards there, they still do different things and they're better together. Donovan has said he needs to play with a point guard. He is not a point guard, right?
By the way, Anthony Edwards has said the same thing. And look at the Anthony Edwards numbers when he's playing with Mike Conley versus playing without Mike Conley. Some guys are natural ones, some guys are natural twos. Donovan can play the one. He is very much a natural two.
Yeah, and I think, there's just some limitations as a playmaker there, but like both of them, again, Darius doesn't have that same aggressiveness and assertiveness as a scorer to do what Donovan does. Those three, to me, it's just a different discussion because you have two All-NBA players and someone that finished 19th in All-NBA voting, right? Like you're talking about kind of that top 20 range there. And when you don't have a bona fide top 5 player, you do not win by changing all-stars out for role players. In fact, as much as people say, hey, there's only like a handful, like 5, 6 examples of smaller backcourts that have won a championship, you cannot find me a single example in modern NBA history of a team that traded an all-star for a collection of role players, like a current all-star for a collection of role players, and that was the move that got them over the hump. You certainly can't do that for a team, without a bona fide top 5 player. The Cavs, their issue isn't talent; it is getting that composure, getting that maturity, and I still think the most important thing about when Kobe traded for Donovan Mitchell is it put them in position for them to have these types of failures and to learn from these experiences. One final thought, because you asked what nonsense drives me nuts. When people say, this was the same thing, what happened against Indy is exactly what happened against the Knicks. It was different. Like the type of toughness they're talking about is that maturity and execution, right? Like knowing how to read and react and still play your style no matter what. It's not physicality. The Cavs actually beat Indy on the offensive glass by a larger margin than the Knicks beat the Cavs in that series. They beat Indy in points in the paint by a larger margin than the Knicks beat the Cavs in that series. Those type of physical markers that everyone looks at, it swung the Cavs way versus Indiana. They lost for completely different reasons. And to me, it was because they did not maintain their offensive identity.
If you want to go and look at a historical list of teams that traded an all-star for pieces, we did that topic on UCSS last week. Justin, the closest example I could find of a team in the same situation Cleveland was when the Rockets traded James Harden to the Thunder traded James Harden to the Rockets for Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, and 2 first-round picks, one of which turned into Steven Adams. Obviously, James Harden went on to have a much better career than the collection of those two. And the Thunder never made it back to the finals until this year, when James Harden is now 7 teams removed from basically where he was.
Reminds me of when the discussion was trade Kevin Love for Jay Crowder and Avery Bradley. Like, the Cavs just need defense. They need some wings on the perimeter. Yeah. Nonsense. That went to beat the Warriors. What are we talking about here?
The Cavs should be listening. Whenever I hear a report, Kobe's listening. Of course he's listening. That's his job as the general manager. Kobe set this team up to win a championship. He made the deal for Donovan Mitchell by pushing all his chips in on the table. You think now he's going to sit back and just be like, I'm good. I'm good cash now. I'm up a little bit, but no, like, that's not how GMs operate when you're in the business to win championships. They should be listening. They should not make a move for the sake of just making a move. They need to make a move that makes basketball sense, that makes financial sense, and puts them in a better position to win their overall goal, which is hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy when it's all said and done. And based on all the trades that I've kind of concocted myself for UCSS, based on all the trades I've seen float around Twitter, I've seen very few, if any, that I agree with for Darius Garland, and I've seen a couple for Jarrett Allen that I say, kind of like that. So I'm more open to hearing deals for anybody, but I'm not just saying yes for the sake of saying yes, because I think the Cavs need to blow it up. If it's a deal that makes them better on the court or seriously impacts their financial situation moving forward, I'm all ears. But I can't stand people who say we got to make a move for the sake of making a move. It almost never works when that's the case.
Yeah, you got to figure out how you can make changes to make it feel different to play against the Cavs, right? And some of that might be rotation, right? Like, you look at it, Sam Merrill played about 73% of his possessions at small forward. If you're going to have a small backcourt, maybe you don't want a 6'4", small forward. And that's basically a function of having Donovan, Darius, and Ty playing so many guard minutes together, right? So those are the types of decisions that they have to make. Obviously, evaluate with Jarrett. If we're going to play a soft switching defense, is Jarrett Allen really the type of big man we want next to Evan Mobley? Like, all of these discussions need to be considered, but ultimately talent is what really matters. We know that we have fifth. It's just going to be what opportunities are out there. And I'm sure that Kobe's looking at all of that.
That is Justin Rowan from the Chasedown Pod. If you don't listen to the Chasedown Pod with Justin and Carter, you are missing out. They are two of the best Cavs podcasters out there. Would highly recommend it. And Justin, we really appreciate you making some time here on a Wednesday morning to talk some Cavs with me, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
We'll see you on UCSS in about 2 hours and 32 minutes. Peace.